what we might then think about is what role innovation policy can play in helping to make a more sustainable future. Do we have the knowledge needed to make a second deep transition? If we admit that we do not, and I do not believe that we do, then how can technology and innovation policy, as well as other policies, be mobilized to tackle the needs? Johann Schott and myself wrote a paper, 3 Frames for Innovation Policy, which reviews the different framings or objectives of policy from the past to the present. And what we argue is that there is an emerging third frame. I'll get to that in just a moment. But if we think of the first frame, many of you will encounter this as the linear model. Okay. The linear model is a kind of pipeline in which if we invest more money in science, we get more useful knowledge, which is then applicable to human betterment and human needs. So from that perspective, if you think that that is really the accurate description, the predominant description that we need to understand the world, then addressing sustainability goals is a matter of putting more money into the pipe so that we get more useful outputs at the end. That will give us more choice, more alternatives, more solutions, more possibilities for the future. However, this frame has had some disappointments. One of them is that there's only a modest correlation between the amount that any given country invests in science and its ability to make progress towards a higher level of social and economic development. Related to this is that less advanced economies have been frustrated by the promise that's made by Frame 1 thinking that once that knowledge is produced, it's available everywhere. And if it's available everywhere, then what explains why some countries are very far behind other countries in terms of the utilization of the knowledge? It must be some kind of failure of technology transfer or worse. Okay? It may have implications about corruption or mismanagement or other very pejorative kinds of ideas about why the country is unable to take advantage of this common pool of knowledge. Third, the results from Frame 1 have created major social problems as well as advances, as well as improvements. So science creates monsters as well as benefits. Perhaps most importantly, Frame 1 is a very indirect way of addressing the social needs and existential threats that I spoke about earlier. And as it is constituted, it is a way for existing elites, existing actors who wish to have business as usual, to capture the policies to capture the direction of investment and not to make the kind of fundamental changes that are required. So frame one thinking has problems. However, frame one nevertheless is useful because we need to have a greater stock of knowledge, even if not everyone can equally exploit it and develop it. It still is a long-term benefit for humankind. Well, frame two kind of thinking, often referred to as national systems of innovation, or from that the broader idea of systems of innovation, said that it's not only a problem of market failure, the absence of incentives of private actors to invest in the creation of science and therefore the necessity of government, but also the problem that there may be underdeveloped or dysfunctional links horizontally and vertically between all of the actors that are necessary to bring innovations into life. These breakdowns can be thought of as system failures. Now, a key motivation for frame two was the desire to perform in an increasingly globalized world in a more effective and competitive way. And there has been some success in applying frame two thinking to improving competitiveness. Like frame one, however, frame two indicates that the regulation of scientific and technical advance should be only undertaken when problems become apparent. So the style is ex post regulation of possible problems, or better, problems that can be demonstrated. We can think about, for example, how long it took before cigarettes were actually seriously constrained by regulation, and how in many countries of the world the state tobacco monopolies are still actively promoting people's smoking, even though this will cause serious health problems in the future. Of course, it will reduce the Social Security payments as well in some of those countries. Frame two's focus on competitiveness and development conceived as economic growth diverts attention from social needs. This is a strong statement, certainly a contestable one, because some people that believe in the frame two approach say, no, we have not ignored social needs. That's a matter for political decision making in the allocation of resources within the system. Okay? But in that sense, there is a good deal of similarity between frame one and frame two. The social needs and purposes are externalized to the management, from the management of science and technology, and made part of another system, a political system. So what is frame three? Like frame two, frame three is a response to the historically prior way of thinking. Frame three thinking focuses directly on social needs and challenges. It's based on the belief that frame one and two are not themselves adequate to achieve the needed deep transition or to adequately address other social goals such as the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, there's much debate to be had about the word adequate in this context, okay? Because adequacy has much to do with political will, desire, and consensus within the society to address particular needs. And perhaps we'll come to that in a few moments. But frame 3 thinking seeks to identify and utilize methods for more inclusive decision-making to bring all parts of society along with the transition. Why is this significant? Because both frames 1 and frames 2 are essentially managed by and key decisions are taken by a technocratic elite. Julian.
So, hi, thanks Ed. Are you saying that mission-orientated policies are compatible with frame 3 thinking?
Well, they could be. It's really a question of what in practice mission-oriented policies amount to. Okay? So in the first instance, if we think about mission-oriented policies of the past, for example, the United States determination to put a man on the moon, okay, then it's definitely true that a technocratic elite took all the relevant decisions. Okay? There weren't other people consulted, and it was only because it was seen as a matter of national prestige that other people in the society were able to go along with the idea, helped by the fact that the person who announced the goal was shot and killed not very long after he announced the promise. So it became a kind of memorial as well. But it's those kinds of things that really shape mission-oriented policies of the past. Now, mission-oriented policies have become a key buzzword within policy circles of late. And what it remains to be seen is whether the processes that are established have the same capture of the process by the technocratic elites, or whether in some way they are more democratic and inclusive than the policies of the past. Okay. So the answer could be, okay, remains to be seen, has some significant risks associated with it because of past experience and models for managing and running mission-oriented research. Frame 3 thinking also seeks means to anticipate problems ex ante, or in the process of research and development. Frame 3 thinking has a critical edge, much as I expressed in the answer to your question, being very suspicious of incumbents and co-optation, the possibility of being redirected towards existing interests and existing powers. Frame 3 prioritizes human flourishing, which is a very somewhat grandiose term, which means basically that people see themselves as having a better life. And we know that people seeing themselves as having a better life is only loosely correlated with having more money in their pocket. There are lots of other determinants of whether people feel that they have a better life or not. So we're not necessarily about maximizing productivity or maximizing economic growth, okay? Not denying that those issues are significant, but pursuit of those goals to the exclusion of others that are consistent with human flourishing may not be productive for human flourishing. So this idea of frame 3 thinking may seem somewhat provisional, and in fact, you'll see that there are some open ends, some need for further development, because frame 3 thinking is relatively new. It's really an attempt to more formalize things that are bubbling up through social movements and social innovation and people that are trying to make a difference in the world with regard to sustainability and other social goals. Okay? It's a way to theorize and think about how those activities are related to traditional thinking about innovation, science, and technology policy.